Hi everyone, and welcome to the very first Kilted Ancestors event on Facebook Live. My name is Claire Wilson, and our guest tonight is Christine Woodcock of Genealogy Tours of Scotland, who will talk to us about sharing the stories from our family. Hi Christine, thank you so much for offering your time to provide this talk to us tonight.
No problem. It's one of my favorite topics.
I think that's the one interest that everyone in the group actually has, is to talk about their family and share memories about their family. Yeah. So Christine's in Canada, I'm in Scotland. How's things in Canada today?
It's good today. We actually have some sunshine, so it's not too bad. Yeah.
It's all right for December.
It is.
So the group has actually gathered quite a lot of new members over the last couple of weeks, which is amazing. I think since we started the group in June, we're about 770 members. How good would it be to get 1,000 or near enough 1,000 for Christmas? So make sure that you invite your friends and invite your family along. Before we get started, I just want to run a quick presentation which details my inspiration for starting Kilted Ancestors and what you can expect from the group.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire Wilson and I am a professional genealogist with Treehouse Genealogy based in central Scotland. You can visit my website at www.treehousegenealogy.co.uk, or you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn or Pinterest. I am the creator of Kilted Ancestors, a free group where members can share stories about their Scottish ancestry. It became apparent that those with Scottish ancestry, regardless if they took the time to research their family history or not, had a genuine interest in discussing where their families came from, any traditions that were passed down the generations, and that most just loved to share their family stories. In light of this, Kilted Ancestors was created in January 2020. Family history is much more than just names, dates and places on a tree. It is the stories about each of these people that tell us much more about who they actually were. Finding out more about where our ancestors lived and worked can reveal so much more about their day-to-day life. Looking more in depth into their occupations, hobbies and interests can even reveal similarities to our own lives. Social history plays a big part in the past. It is what brings our ancestors to life, and it is so important to keep these stories alive. So who can join Kilted Ancestors? Well, anyone who has Scottish ancestry or is researching their Scottish roots, although this is not compulsory. Anyone who wants to learn more about Scottish history and heritage, or who would like to connect with a group of like-minded individuals. What happens in the Kilted Ancestors group? It's a place to connect with Scotland's amazing heritage. Even if you've never been to Scotland, you can share what you love about the country and ask those burning questions that you wish you'd had the answers to. It's a place to share old family photographs and tell the stories about those captured within those images. It's a place to tell stories about the artefacts within your family, how they've been passed down the generations and who they belong to. It's a place to share information that has been found in old letters or documents, ask for help in analysing the contents, and maybe even get some answers. Kilted Ancestors is a place for sharing those all-important stories. Why not get your friends and family involved too? Join an amazing community who are proud of their Scottish heritage and want to shout about it. Don't worry if you're unsure what to post. Each month, we will set prompts to help inspire you. Past topics have included Scottish tartan, World War, strong women, and common names. These are designed to help you remember the stories that have been passed down in your family and to find out more about your ancestors. These are open to your own interpretations, so post what you want. Why not copy your posts into a scrapbook that can be passed down to future generations? What better way to preserve your family stories? Remember that you are free to post anything relating to Scottish history and heritage at any time. Our members are from all over the world, but you all have one thing in common: your love for Scotland. Let's have fun and get to know one another. So how do you join? We have a private Facebook group. You can view this at www.facebook.com/groups/Kilted Ancestors, or alternatively search for Kilted Ancestors on Facebook. You can find out more about Kilted Ancestors and sign up to be notified about monthly prompts on our website at www.treehousegenealogy.co.uk/Kilted Ancestors. Alternatively, post on whatever social media channel you're using, and don't forget to use #Kilted Ancestors within your post. Sign up now, get involved, meet like-minded people, and let's start sharing our family stories. Thank you.
Well, my job is done.
No, I'm hoping that you'll lead on from this, Christine. I mean, it's a huge topic. I mean, it is, you know, there's so many things that we can all talk about, share in our family tree.
Do you know what caught me in that, Claire, is that I've never seen that video before, and yet so much of what you said in there is what I'm going to say.
Okay. I only created it a few days ago to try and maybe bring in some new members. So yeah. So we have posted Christine's handout already into the Facebook group, if you haven't already seen it. If anyone has any questions as Christine is going through her talk, just pop them in the comments under the handout post, and we'll have a look at answering some of them afterwards. Tonight's talks will also be recorded, so don't worry if you forget to note something down or you need to pop off early. We will share the link for that as well. So other than speaking at genealogy events, Christine also arranges genealogy tours to Scotland. So do people join these tours from Canada, or is it further afield, Christine?
So it's North America, it's Canada. My first few were strictly the US. But it's Canada, the US, Australia, and New Zealand.
Wow, as far away as Australia.
And the reason that I started them is the tours is, you know, I've said before, my mom was one of 20 living siblings. And so when I started doing family history, I started going around and doing talks because, you know, I'm always full of myself and have everybody wants to hear me.
No.
And what really struck me, Claire, was people would say that they had Scottish ancestors, and they'd be, you know how you just get that fire in your belly and yet they had never been to Scotland.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, how could you not go to, I mean, that's where my granny lives.
Yeah.
You know? And so I thought, well, I know a way to get them there that's a little bit different than the clans and castles tours. You know, they can go and they can connect in a way that they wouldn't be able to connect on any other tour. And so that's why I started bringing them over. And I get to see my family.
Exactly, yes, so it's double whammy. So how long do your tours normally last then?
I've recently just cut them back. They used to be 10 days. And so we had research time, and then we had time for them to go to whatever part of Scotland their ancestors were from. We'd come back, finish up the research, and then be done. And that got to be, I started thinking about it. I thought, you know what, I'm better just to do the Monday to Friday where we're in the research places, and then they can go, because most people don't leave when I leave, right? Yeah. They stay. So some of them stay for a week, some of them stay for 2 weeks, some of them stay for 6 weeks. And so from there, they can just go to whatever part of Scotland they want. And they don't have to worry about coming back for dinner, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think a
So,
lot of people do that where, they arrange to come to Scotland for, an event or a clan gathering or whatever it happens to be, and tag extra time on to the end of it. I
yeah.
think it makes more sense if you're going so far.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I've really been proud of is that so many of the people come back.
Yeah,
They don't come with me necessarily, although I mean I do have a lot of people who, they're what I call repeat offenders, and the reason that I think they do that is they don't have to organize anything; they just have to show up, right?
yeah,
But so many people, just come back on their own. They bring their family, they bring their friends, and they don't come to do research. They just come to enjoy Scotland,
yeah,
right? Because they've
yeah.
made that connection with it now, and they want everybody else to know how special Scotland is. So,
Uh, so
can't wait
yeah,
to get back.
I think the next time that you come over, I'll definitely be tagging along for a bit. It sounds so interesting. Well, I mean, I spend a lot of time normally in archives out with COVID, but it's my workplace. But yeah, some of the places that you go sound really interesting. I think I'll tag along next time. So if anyone wants to check out Christine's website, it's www.genealogytoursofscotland.ca. I'll put that in the comments box next to the handout as well. So it's over to you, Christine.
Right, and you're going to monitor the comments, yeah?
I'll keep an eye on that, yes. So
Okay.
get your comments in, get your questions in.
I'm going to find my screen. So I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. Yeah, I'm just going to move our faces out of the way. Oh.
I'm just going to take my camera off anyway and let you.
Yeah, I think I'll
let you
probably do
what
the
you're
same.
doing. Yeah.
Okay. So as, very similar to what Claire just said, for me, genealogy isn't just about the numbers and dates and places in a database. It's about the people who came before me, learning their stories. As a family historian, I think that I have an obligation to share those stories with the rest of my family, because it's not just my ancestors, it's their ancestors as well. This is my granny on the left and my mom on the right, and you could probably put me in the middle because I tend to genetically look like them. My granny and my mom were the storytellers of the family. And as I said to Claire, my mom had a part of a very large sibling group, and we had company come from Scotland really from May until September, almost every year of my childhood and right up to young adulthood. So at every family gathering, they told the stories. They told the same stories over and over, to the point where our eyes would glaze over, our ears would turn to cloth, and we would think, no, please. However, my mom died suddenly at a very young age, and my granny followed just a few months later. By then I had 2 children, and something inside of me kicked into high gear. I needed to preserve the stories so that my kids knew them, so that my grandkids and future generations would not only know the stories, but know that they belonged. And with that, I became very brave. And with the help of one of my aunts here in Canada, we connected with all of the descendants of my grandfather. So my grandfather was Henry Fowler Crawford, and he was from Lanarkshire, Scotland. And we put together a record of his descendants. My grandfather's first wife, Sarah, died in childbirth with her 6th child. The baby died 3 months later. My granny married my grandfather, and they had another 16 children together, one of whom was born asleep. My granny was really the only grandmother that any of the grandchildren knew, because by the time Sarah's children were having children, she was long gone, and my granny was the only one left. So while Harry is the glue that brought us together, family is the glue that, family was everything to Dora, and she really is the glue that kept us bound. This is a sample of the book, and you can see it's really rudimentary. I printed off pages. I think there's like 300 pages in here. This is my first attempt, so, be kind. And we coil bound it and we handed it out. So at the end of each section is a record of the family. So what I did was I went chronologically and I started with the story of Harry's birth. So I list his parents, I list his brothers, and then I talk about him and Sarah getting married, and then I go for each one of their children. And each one of their children have a section in the book just like this. This is one of Sarah and Harry's children, my Aunt Peggy. And so it talks about Peggy and her life. And then at the end of each sibling section, there's a family group record that has their descendants. And so really, if they wanted to pretend that they weren't part of the family, they could just literally have that piece of the book and keep it for themselves. Aunts, uncles, and cousins sent in some wonderful ephemera to be included in the book. This is a letter that was written by to my uncle from my great-grandmother. So my uncle, this is now Harry and Dora. So Dora is my grandmother. This is their, let me think this through, Henry. So this is the second child of them. He was a son, obviously, and he was born prematurely, and he was very, very tiny at birth. I think he was something like 1.75 pounds. Now, in those days, you know, Joe wasn't expected to live. Granny already had another young baby. She had my Uncle Henry. There was not a whole lot of time in between them. And so Granny Mac, as we refer to her, who is my paternal great-grandmother, she decided that she was going to take over and look after Joe. This was always a bone of contention with my grandmother and her mother-in-law, because she never returned Joe. Granny Mac raised Joe. Now, you know, it's not like they lived at opposite ends of the city, or they actually lived next door to each other. They lived in row housing. Granny Mac was in one house. My Uncle Tom was in another house, and my grandpa was in a third house. And I think there were like 5 or 6 of them all together. So, you know, my granny got to see Joe all the time. But Granny Mac made it clear that she was the mom. And when Harry suffered an accident, he was a dairy farmer, and when he suffered an accident and had to give up farming and moved away, Joe stayed with Granny Mac. Joe went and enlisted in the army, and you can see here, this is a letter that Granny Mac wrote to Joseph. And I love it because she calls him my dearest son. And she talks about his daddy, which is actually her second husband, Geordie Mac. And it's in her handwriting. And Joe was never really a part of our family because he was raised separately. Obviously, he was raised by his grandmother. And so when Joe came to Canada after Granny Mac died, Joe came to Canada, and he lives in Northern Ontario. One of the wonderful things that happened with me doing the book is that Joe's family reconnected with their Crawford ancestors, or their Crawford family. And that has just been amazing to me. Joe and Rena had a very large family. They had 9 children, and there's, I don't know, thousands of grandchildren, great-grandchildren. It's very confusing. It's as confusing as Harry's children, because you have aunts and uncles who are actually younger than their nieces and nephews. But when we were putting the book together, Sharon, his daughter, Joe's daughter, found this in among her dad's stuff, and she sent it to be included in the book. And this is the first time that anybody got to see it, and it was just absolutely wonderful. This is a Christmas card. This was sent by my Aunt Jean, who resided in Coatbridge, actually, until the day she died. And she is the youngest of Sarah and Harry's children. So she was very close in age to Joe. And when Rena and Joe came to Canada, they had Christmas cards made. This is their eldest son, Billy. And the Christmas card was sent back to family, and my Aunt Jean held on to it. And, you know, so this is Billy as a young boy. And again, they didn't have, none of his family had seen the Christmas card. They had seen the photo, obviously, but they had never seen the Christmas card. They didn't know that it had been made into a Christmas card. So that was absolutely wonderful for them to see as well. So when I was doing the book, I included maps. I wanted people who had never been to Scotland, mainly Joe's family and some of my younger cousins, to know where the family was from. I also included newspaper articles. So this is an article that was in, I think it was the Dalkeith Advertiser and one of the national papers, maybe Daily Mail, not sure, in February 1955. So my youngest aunt was 4, and my grandmother was interviewed for the paper, talking about the size of her family. And my aunt, who had helped me with the book, when she went home on a holiday, she and another aunt went to, actually I think they went to well, at that time it was the Midlothian Family History Society, now it's Lothians. And they went there and were able to get, this newspaper article happened to be in their files. And so they were able to get a copy of that. And of course, I include certificates in there as well, so that people know that I'm not just making this stuff up. Although I probably could, but, and so we didn't have, this is the death certificate for Sarah. We only have one photograph of Sarah, and of course we had none of baby Joe, so we only have his birth and death records in there. So after I had done the Crawford book and how well received it was, I decided that probably we should continue on. So on the right-hand side there is my dad's line, the McDonald's from Rosewell, and that was given out as well. The one in the middle is my husband's family. That's his great-grandparent, it was great-grandparents, sorry, Edward and Eliza. They're actually from Birmingham, just outside of Birmingham, came over to Canada. And then just to show you some of the things that I included in Edward and Eliza's story, you know, one of the things that really happened when I put this book together is everybody got really excited about it, as I said. And so, as I said with the Crawford book, you know, I was getting photographs, and I was getting newspaper articles and all the stuff that people had sent me. And when I started doing this for Doug's family, Doug is the second oldest of 4 siblings. One of his brothers just got really excited about it, and he went around and photographed all the places where the family had lived and all the schools that the kids had gone to. Interestingly enough, they moved around Brantford quite a bit. They always stayed in the same city, but they seemed to move quite a bit. So you can see at the top there is one of the schools, elementary schools, that the kids went to when they were younger. And then down on the bottom is a house, and that house literally is about 1.5 miles up the road from me. And it was built by my father-in-law. And so every time we drive past there, my kids know that that house was made by their Grandpa Woodcock. Now, in terms of distributing the book, it's entirely up to you how you do that. What I did was I gave one to every sibling. So for the Crawford book, I made sure that every living sibling received a copy, because as I said, it's about sharing. It's not just my family history, it's their family history as well. And so I gave a copy to all of the people who were still alive. If they were not still alive, either their eldest child got it or the person out of their family who had helped supply the information that was put into the book. So in Sharon's case, Sharon is not the eldest of Joe's children, but she was the one that was able to get all the information about her siblings and her nieces and nephews to help us. So she got a free copy. The same with the McDonald book. I gave one to, by the time I got the Crawford book done, none of my father's family were left. So he was the youngest of 9, and they were all gone. But I gave a copy to each of my cousins. And I could do that because I have 10 McDonald cousins as opposed to 65 Crawford cousins. And then with the Woodcock book, we gave Doug's siblings all received one. I have a copy for each of my children, and so the grandchildren all have their own copy as well. And that was just something that as a family we decided we wanted to do. And you know, it's really interesting, because Doug's brothers and sister were absolutely over the moon. They absolutely, I mean, I can't describe to you the feeling that people get when they see it in print. It becomes a treasured heirloom. I know with the Crawford book, you know, it's been designated in wills as to who gets it next. or that's got a sticky note on the china cabinet or the drawer as to who gets it next. And that certainly was the same with the MacDonald book, and it was the same with the Woodcock book. And I had given a copy to my husband, obviously, and asked him to, I said, here's your book. And he, about 4 or 5 days later, and I said to him, did you read that book at all? He said, yeah. I said, well, what did you think? He said, well, I don't know who any of those people are. Who are the Dawsons? I said, well, that would be your grandmother's maiden name. I tell you, men sometimes. So after I had, I think I'm just going to see if I can come out of screen sharing here. Oh, sorry. After I had done the book, I still had all kinds of things that I wanted to do in terms of sharing information. I had gone and continued, obviously, to do my research. And while I did my research, I uncovered more of the story. And in uncovering more of the story, of course, I wanted to be able to share that as well. So one of the ways that I did that was that I started doing a family newsletter. So I'm just going to show you, I have them, I have them all in PDF, and I have them uploaded to a website that I use for cloud storage for this kind of stuff. So this is just an example of one of the newsletters that I did, and I did it quarterly for probably about 9 years, and then I did it twice a year for another 2 years, and then I just kind of gave up. And the reason that I gave up, interestingly enough, everybody thinks it's because my husband had passed away, but it really wasn't, because he wasn't a Crawford. And you know the reaction I got from him when I did his own family history. It was because my Aunt Jean had passed away. My Aunt Jean passed away about a month before my husband did, and she was the last child of Sarah. And I really did the book and the newsletter for her and her siblings, not just Sarah's children, but Dora's children as well. And Jean was always the one that whenever I put a newsletter out, she would call and tell me whether I got the information correct or not, or she would have more of the story. And so, not having that there anymore, it really just took it all away from me. Kind of took the wind out of my sails. But it's really funny because my cousin had asked me, I think last 2018, 2019, when I was home, she said, are you not doing the newsletter anymore? And I said, no. And she said, well, that just increases the value because now they're hard to get. So this is, and it started out, I sent it to 20 people because I sent it to, each sibling family. And by the end, it was well over 200 people that got it. I did it for Harry's children, and then his brother, Tom, has his children wanted to be part of receiving it, and the other brother Joseph, his family wanted, or not, yeah, Joseph, his family wanted to be able to receive it as well. And then I had cousins that I had connected with through Genes Reunited who were all over. I have them in Australia, and I have them in New Zealand, and I have them in Scotland and England. And so the newsletter really just went everywhere. I stopped, in fact, printing it and sending it because it just became too cumbersome, well, really expensive actually. And so by the time I was up to maybe 125 issues, I started sending it electronically, and then it was up to them to print it out. And one cousin from my paternal great uncle, from his line, what he found out about them, and he took them and he printed them off and he took them to his granny's house. And he said the reason he did that was because everybody went to see Granny at least once through the week. And it was fascinating to me. It was like a lending library, that they would take these newsletters. So they would take maybe 3 or 4 issues and then take them away and read them and come back and get the next 3 or 4, and somebody else would get the first 3 or 4. And it was just fabulous to hear that story. So this is, we have now generation 4 in one line. This is more information that I had uncovered about, and actually I'll put this story in Kilted Ancestors. This is about my grandfather's brother Hugh, who disappeared. Everybody knew he went to America and nobody else knew what happened to him. And I uncovered his story. And so it's really quite a fascinating one, and I will share that in Kilted Ancestors. And this is just more of sharing that story. And then we can come over. I always did, people would contribute. And so they talked about their holidays. I also did, this was when the Olympics were here in Canada. I also did their birthdays. So every quarter I did the 3 birthdays that were coming up. And I did wedding anniversaries. I announced new branches. And what was really fascinating for me was people would get this and they didn't really, the first thing they did was they went to look at the photographs. They didn't read the birthdays. They didn't read the headlines. They all went and they looked at the photographs because all of them needed to know that they belonged. And I would always get comments about, oh my gosh, look who I look like. I look so much like her. I look so much like him. And so they could really see the resemblance. And that was just absolutely fabulous to me. And then, of course, they would go back and they would read through the other stuff. I started sharing recipes in them. So what I did was I would put the recipes in along with a photograph of the person who had given me the recipe, and then the recipe itself. And this became very popular as well. And people started, this is one way for us to take the recipes that have been a part of our family for a couple of generations and be able to pass that on to other generations. I need to stop sharing again. And oh, sorry, you know what? I'm just gonna go back in there and do the same. So one of the other things that I did in terms of sharing was I started blogging, and I would write down our family stories, and people, I would send them the link and they could get information that way. And this talks about a death of my 3 times great grandfather and his son, Andrew Carrick. William and Andrew were killed in a mining accident in Hamilton. It was the end of their shift actually, and they were just about at the mouth of the mine coming back out, and the lift let go. And so, essentially it just, battered against the sides of the shaft all the way down, and they were killed at the bottom. And so I share that story, and I share how I got the information. There's a fabulous website, if you have Mining Ancestors, Scottish Mining, and they have the accident reports, the inspector reports, and also newspaper articles that are associated with it. And so everybody has access to the story of our great-great-great-grandfather. And there you can see I've included the information from the newspapers in there. I'm not sure what that is. And then I also did, this is for my dad's family, and his mother was a Haddo. And so I went looking for more information on them. And actually I was going between tours. I was going between one in Edinburgh and the one in Glasgow. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take time and do some ancestral tourism of my own. And so I went to Mid-Calder and found the family home. And then I went to the Almond Trust, the Museum for Shale Mining, because my grandfather had been a shale miner. That's how he met my grandmother. And then I went out, this is several generations back, the Haddos had owned land around Carluke. And I went out and found that as well. And so was able to share that information with family members. And again, still with the Haddos and the McDonalds, this is a certificate. And I almost thought I was going to have to marry my cousin when he came with this. He had sent me this box, and it had photographs in it. And this is a certificate of merit for my grandmother when she graduated elementary school. And this photograph was in it, and it was really quite fascinating to me because this is my paternal grandmother. She is standing behind the woman who is seated. So this is Walter and Mary, and they are supposed to have 5 daughters, but there's 6 little girls in there. So doing the story, putting the information together, I've been able to piece who these women are in addition to my granny. I know which sister is which, but I could not place the little girl at all. And then when the 1911 census was released, of course, you go and you look at the new information, and lo and behold, I found Walter and Mary, and they had the very last person listed in the census was their granddaughter was living with them. So this is my dad's eldest sister, Mary. The little girl there is his oldest sister, Mary. It's probably the first picture ever taken of my Auntie Mary. And she was born before Maggie and Archie were married, and obviously was raised by her, raised in her mother's home until the point of her parents getting married. All right, so let's see if we can stop sharing here, and then I'll come back to the video, or sorry, to the PowerPoint. All right, so I did talk about newsletters. I talked about a family blog. Now, one of the things that I would encourage you to do, is if you're going to do a blog and you decide for whatever reason to stop doing that, or you want to just kind of memorialize that, there's a website called Blog to Print. Claire, maybe you can put that in the comments. So it's blog and then the number 2 and then print, and it's all put together as one word. And it will take your blog. You put the URL in for your blog, and it will slurp, it says, all of the posts. And then you can go through and take out whatever ones aren't relevant. So, I mean, if it's a family blog, that's fine. I also have some business posts on mine. So, there was no point saving those. It didn't matter to the family. And then they will put it into book form, and you receive it with the photos and the certificates and whatever else you put in there. And it absolutely is fabulous. And I was able to get copies of that for us to save as well. As I said, I've included family recipes in there. But, it's also, we are the family storytellers and the family story keepers and the family memory keepers. And I never take that for granted. I am truly honored to be the person who has been blessed with being given the job of keeping the family memories, and whether that's through people giving me photographs or whatever. But it's important that we also document our own story. And so this year, being very unique, I actually did that. I did that on 2 separate occasions, or I've done 2 books simultaneously throughout the year. The one on the left is about the pandemic itself. This is volume 2. I'm on volume 2 now. And really just talked about, things like being locked down, the cases as they were rising around the world. I every now and then give updates as to what the statistics are for worldwide, the United States, Canada, my province, Ontario, and then for my city. I talk about things, how things were in terms of curbside pickup, that we had to order things online and pay for that and then go to the store, phone the store, and they would come and deliver it to our car. Just things that I know that generations from now, people are going to want to wonder what it was like to live through the pandemic. And I do intend to donate a copy of this to both my provincial archives and to my national archives. And really the place that I got the idea for this was just after the pandemic had started. And I noticed there were archives in Scotland. I know Glasgow City Archives, and there was another one, it may have been in the Highlands, and they were asking about COVID stories. So if you were, keeping a journal or keeping a scrapbook or keeping newspaper clippings or whatever, and you didn't mind donating a copy, they would be incredibly appreciative. And I thought, hey, good idea. So I've started doing that here, and I will donate to, because it's the Canadian experience, I'll be donating it to archives here in Canada. But you know what? 2020 has just been a year by itself, right? It just hasn't, the pandemic has been, I keep saying I'm living in pandemic hell, and we really are. And in a lot of ways, it fascinates me because, I'm fascinated by science. I'm fascinated by health. And my mother, I was raised by a nurse who was trained in Scotland. And, it's my mom's biggest nightmare that a rogue germ would take over the earth. This is sort of the thing that she prepared me for my whole entire life. And I have to say, I'm not coping with it as well as I thought she thought I would. But there have been so many other things that have happened. And so I've kept another book at the same time. And I've documented the Australia wildfires. I've documented the US elections, because being in Canada, that's been so important to us. I documented the Brexit. It's almost like every day. For a while there, it was something new was happening, and it's like, geez, didn't have that in my bingo card. And so I've been keeping copies, these 2 books throughout 2020. The one on the right there, the yearbook, will be completed at the end of the month. The one on the left, I'm hoping will be completed like by mid-2021, because honestly, I'm done. And again, the one on the right is also, both copies will be donated to the archives. So in terms of doing the story of you, because you also need to leave you have to be a good ancestor. Somebody one day will be researching your story, and you need to share that. You need to document that and write it down so other people have the information. Share your childhood, share the good, share the bad, share the ugly. Ask, write down where you went to school. What did you like about school? What didn't you like about school? Who were your friends in school? Where did you go to work? Where did you meet your spouse? What was it like to become a parent for the first time, or to become a grandparent for the first time? What were the biggest struggles, the biggest changes, the biggest heartaches, the greatest joys in your life? What are your memories of the generations that came before you, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your parents? And this one kind of is very salient to me, because I just lost my eldest aunt, and I was so blessed the last 2 years to be able to get stories and information from her. And one of the fabulous things that happened was that I took the family book. I've since done it as a photo book, so it looks a little bit more polished. And I took that to her, and just going through, and she would look at the pictures, and she would start telling me their story. She would start talking. Now, of course, she was like in her mid 80s, right? So the filters were a little bit gone. Mine are gone anyway, but hers were just starting to go. And so she would tell me really what she thought of that person, how well they interacted with their spouse, how well they interacted with their children, who their favorite child was, what they did for, when they were young. She remembers one of them riding their bikes, she and her sister riding their bikes to work in Moffat. And so, just being able to get that sort of intimate detail was just phenomenal for me as the family historian. And so you want to be able to do that with your story as well. You want to be able to take all of that stuff that you still remember about your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, and your uncles, and write that down so that future generations will have that level of detail. What were your family holiday traditions? I'm actually doing a presentation later on the Christmas cracker. Everybody, it's a staple in our family. I'm sure it is in yours as well. Where were your family vacations, and what were they like? We did a lot of camping, and same with my children. My husband and I took big road trips and went camping with the kids, and that's still something that they'll do as adults. Write your own story. Think about major events that have taken place. Think about assassinations of presidents, impeachments of presidents, men on the moon, civil rights movements, the whole Black Lives Matter. Think of any wars that have gone on and what that felt like, whether you lived through one or whether you're in that country or not. Think of 9/11 and the war that in Afghanistan that happened after that. And just document 2020. It's been a phenomenal year. And then how have those things changed the way you live? I remember my daughter saying to me a couple of months ago, we were talking about the pandemic and how, mind-boggling it is. And she said, well, this is brand new for Christopher and I, Christopher being my son, because you've been through this before, Mom. You did this with SARS. And I said, we didn't do this with SARS. And so I started looking up some numbers and facts and figures. Of course, SARS was nothing on the scale of this. And I said to her, you know what, hon, the only thing that changed with SARS is we now have hand sanitizing stations everywhere, but nothing else. We never wore masks. We didn't isolate. We didn't do any of the things that we're doing now. So it's really important just to say, that's one of the things that changed. And you think about 9/11, and now we think nothing of, having our luggage examined in great detail when we go to the airport. Here in North America, we have to remove our shoes, and you just do it. It's a change that came about as because of a world event. And so those sorts of things are things that you should be documenting as well. How have they shaped you as a person? Are you more anxious? Are you more open? Are you more flexible? Whatever. What did you fear about them? And then what should the legacy of those events be? What was the teachable moment that you would want your children to know, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren? Interview older relatives. I mean, as I say, just the information that comes out of them is phenomenal. So this man here is my uncle. He's my absolute favorite person in the world. And I had gone to my Auntie Jean's. I was in Scotland. I had gone to my Auntie Jean's, and she had let me scan some photographs. And of course, nowadays we get photographs and you can make as many copies as you want, and you can post it, and it's digital and everybody gets to see it. In those days, first of all, if they had cameras, that was one thing. And secondly, it took one photograph. And so, not every family member got a copy. And so I went from my Aunt Jean's one night, the next night I went to my Uncle Dode's, and this is them seeing the photographs that Jean had. And it's the first time they're seeing them. And you can tell by my Auntie Kathy's face on the left-hand side there, seeing a photograph of her father-in-law as a young man. And then, the photo on the right is Dode telling me stories that that have been triggered in his mind based on whatever photographs we were looking at the time. So questions to ask older relatives: where did they go to school? What was school like? Where did they go to work when school was done? How old were they? Where did they meet their spouse? Where did they get married? Who attended the wedding? What was their first home together? Where was it? How long did they live there? What was it like to be a parent? What were the special holiday traditions? What would you like your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren to know about your life? Just before I go on to resources, I do want to say, I do want to talk, and I think it's in the handout, about the skeletons in the closet. And when you're doing family history, you are absolutely going to come across this. And my own personal belief is that I shouldn't be embarrassing anybody. So when I discovered anything, I would contact that person and say, I'm aware. How would you like me to handle that? And if it was something that everybody knew, then they'd say, oh, sure, go ahead and put it in. If it was something that nobody had known about other than them and maybe, their family, their immediate family, then I wouldn't put it in there. Never once did I want to embarrass anybody. That's not what it was about. It wasn't about outing anybody's story. Although I did threaten at one point to do one issue of the Crawford Family newsletter that I was going to call the Crawford Family Outing, and I was going to out all the gays and lesbians in the family, to which my aunt asked if she could be on the front page. But really, I mean, that's not the purpose of sharing the family stories. I do document them. I document them in my own family history software. I do not share those publicly without permission. And I don't do it. So now I can tell the story of that uncle who went missing, because there isn't anybody left alive. The people that are left alive from his family are 2 or 3 generations removed from that, and they're fascinated by the story. But I wouldn't tell it to embarrass his mother, to embarrass his wife, or to embarrass him or his immediate children. But as I said, I have documented it. So I'm always very, very cautious of that, along with the awesomeness of being tasked with being the family historian and the family memory keeper, I think we have a responsibility. And part of that is respecting dignity. And so I'm really very, very conscious about that. So if you're looking for resources, Family Search, free website, one of the better free, well, I love it as a database, but they do have, if you go to their wiki, you can get information on, honestly, absolutely anything. And they do have a wiki on creating family histories, and talks about the stories and the importance of journaling. And so I absolutely would recommend that you head over there. I use forever.com, do design and print there. And I use it for scrapbooking. Just before I finish up, Claire, I'm just going to give one more look at that. Right, so this is a book that I just did. This is my eldest aunt that just passed away. And I was blessed by being handed her, let's hide this information because that's not important, by doing her family story. She had, they used to take a lot of home movies, and my cousin had handed me a box of 22 home movies, and I had those digitized. And honestly, we had the best fun going through those and remembering them and seeing ourselves as children. And there's a picture, there's a whole movie of me visiting my grandpa back in Scotland when I was 4. There's movies of my 5th or 6th birthday party. I mean, it's fascinating. And then there were some of them I was able to share on Facebook, because one of the reasons I use Facebook is that I'm connected to my cousins across the world, and they absolutely loved it, and they tagged other people in it and shared it. I just love to see how it goes, sort of viral. But this is a book. So after my Aunt Flo had passed away, I asked her daughter if I could get some photographs. And I said, I'll put a book together for your mom. Fiona had no idea what that meant, but sure. And she handed me boxes, and I mean boxes. There was a huge box with probably 20 photo albums in it, and then there were 2 other boxes with just photographs. I scanned over 1,000 of them, and I put together a story of my aunt. So I talk about her, where she was born. There's a photo of the house. That's her birth certificate, her parents, her as a young nurse, maps of where they were, her meeting meeting her husband, talked about that. There's where she worked at Rosalind Lee. That's her as a young nurse. I absolutely love this because this is my uncle. So my Aunt Flo married my Uncle Nick, and this is Nick's family. And that photograph of the bride and groom is Nick's mom and dad from 1930. I absolutely love that we had that. This is, this is a photograph that was taken in Scotland when they became engaged, and it's just before they emigrated to Canada. And she was able to give me her story about coming to Canada, and I was able to document that as well. Just a funny story about the car. So whenever they went back, they came over in 1955, and they were 5 years before they went back. And they went back to Scotland, and the first thing they would do was gather up all the younger siblings of my Aunt Flo's siblings and put them in the car and then take them for ice cream. And they were in, they'd gone, I think, down to Peebles or somewhere, taking the kids for ice cream. And as the car was emptying out and there was child after child after child after child coming out, there was a man standing at the outside the ice cream shop, and he said to my uncle, is this the Sunday school picnic? He said, no, this would be my wife's younger siblings. So I talk about her in Canada, what brought her to Canada, the fact that their home, I love this as well. This is them building their home. And that was really the refuge for everybody who came here. Everybody stayed there for some while until they got themselves together. And so this goes on, for quite a few pages. And it also talks about her grandchildren. And we were able to make copies of this and give this to, so there's, she had 2 children, my 2 cousins, they each got a copy, but so did her 3 grandsons. And that really was the piece that broke the code for me. Right since I started doing genealogy, it's been, how do we connect with the younger generation? How do we get them involved? And I'm telling you, sharing the stories is how you do it, because those kids bawled. They bawled when they got that book. They cried, and they got together and they looked at it again and again and again. They got together at night, the first night, and then they went to each other's houses to look at each other's copies, even though they were identical. They showed them to everybody who came in. I have one aunt, I was just talking to her son this morning, and she's nothing around sentimental. Sentimental isn't even a word in her vocabulary, and she has this book sitting on her coffee table and shows it to everybody who comes in. Her son has been fascinated with the stories and with family history and with the newsletters. And he actually asked me for a copy of the family history book. And so I have given that to him. And, it's just, that really is how I have hooked them. Hook the younger generations is by telling them. And other fun things that I've done is I've made calendars. So I've used the old photographs. I've made calendars. I've done this for years for Christmas. And they get these sent. This one actually is for my uncle in Scotland. And it's just photographs. And my aunt, one day I called her not too long ago, and she had taken a bit of time to get to the phone, and I was a bit worried because she's in her 80s. And she said, oh no, I was up the stairs. She said, I was looking through all the old calendars that you gave us. She said, I just love those books. Okay, so that would be it. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Claire. Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Let's see the video back. That was amazing, Christine. Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much. It's unfortunate. It's one of those things that I could talk about for 10 hours.
For some reason, I don't know, I had Facebook Live on my phone and on my computer, and they're running at different speeds, which is rather strange.
Yeah.
Quite a few comments. Gordon has basically said, hi Claire, looking good, like the jumper. Very, very festive, yeah. Janice has said, how do you access old newspapers? I'd posted a bit in the box, obviously saying the British Newspaper Archive.
And libraries.
Yeah, if you do have, well, she's in America, she's in Washington State.
Okay.
If you take a full Find My Past subscription, you get the British Newspaper Archive with that. The Scotsman also have a subscription website. If you're in Scotland and you get a National Library of Scotland membership, although you need to be a Scottish resident for that, you have access to quite a few newspaper archives, and also Google newspapers. It's free to use. It isn't indexed, but if you know when an event was, you can look at the newspaper, look at that date event, and hopefully try and find it. So that's the ones that I would certainly recommend at the moment. Who else have we got? Maggie has said she does have Scottish ancestry. She's never been to Scotland, and it's on her list of places to go. I think we've hopefully inspired you a bit, Maggie. Susan, now I don't know if you noticed Susan's post on the Kilted Ancestors group.
Is that the one?
Christine?
Is she the one that you had suggested that she watch this? Did she do
Yes.
a video?
Yes.
She did a video. Yeah. I actually just saw that before you
Yeah.
and I got together. Yeah.
So what she's saying is she's made 5 oral history videos of our 86-year-old mum's childhood and background by interviewing her. Apparently she's a very fit 86-year-old, which is great for getting the family stories. But she did put in the group a slideshow of old pictures of some of the places that her family grew up, who had lived there, and when they lived, when they were born, when they died. And it was really interesting. I hope that it will inspire other members to perhaps do something similar. What else have I got? Janice also said it's pretty cool to see family resemblances. My sister and my father's sister look almost identical when they were young. Well, do you know, there's a funny story because my brother actually is identical to my great-grandfather, less the fancy moustache. But when you cover the fancy moustache up, he is identical to him. It's actually, it doesn't look like anybody else in the family, but it looks like my great-grandfather.
Do you know, I used to do a part in the newsletter, and it was called Either or Crawford. And it was the same. It was, so say my Aunt Jean's sibling and my Uncle Joe's, and so they wound up, and I remember my Uncle Joe saying to me, Joe Crawford, young Joe Crawford looks more like Alex Crawford than Alex does. So Janice has said in here, what would you do about old letters regarding a family feud?
Yes, well, I actually thought we might have a debate on this. What is your thoughts?
So my thoughts are, I would absolutely keep those letters.
Yeah.
So she'd heard about it, and it's really not pleasant. So I think that's important to keep. Yeah. However, now that all parties involved are deceased, there's a little bit more in there. And what I would want to know is who's still living that's going to be badly affected by it. So if it's 2 generations removed, then I think it's probably okay to share. However, if the children of the people who are involved are still around, probably I would just hold on to it.
Yeah.
And again, if you're writing your own story, you can absolutely document in that, knowing that 2 generations from now, it isn't going to matter. It'll be a fascinating piece of information, but it's not going to embarrass anybody.
It's true. I mean, it's, the minute someone passes away, they're not, data protection's out the window. As you say, it's just about offending. You don't want to offend anyone who's connected to that person. But, I think everyone will have a family feud or a family argument. We've all got them.
Can you imagine how many we have?
I've got one side of the family that always fell out with one another.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's, it's quite, you can't get on with everybody all of the time. So, we're all human. Yeah. So Janice also said, I wonder how many have private family groups on Facebook. It's a really cool way to share stories and photos too.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, I mean, if you had a family group, you could start up your own Facebook group and share details of your research, old family photographs, people could share the memories. And that's something that you could copy and paste and put, into something, a publication that it wouldn't be lost forever. And it might trigger thoughts as well within family members. So yeah, good idea. She said that the book that you showed earlier was really nice and doesn't require a computer to view a book or printed newsletters, which is really good for older members of the family who don't have computers. They can have a physical book and it's something that they can touch. Where did you get that printed then, Christine?
Through Forever, you can print them right through there. So you can, so they have 2 ways of doing it. One is sort of you just drag and drop your pictures in, which is fine for people who just want to grab and drop their pictures in. But I like to tell the story, so it doesn't work for me. But they also have scrapbooking software, which is sort of my dirty little secret that I spend lots of time and money scrapbooking family stories. So
yeah,
and then I just get it printed right from there. And actually, so the book that I did on the recent one that I did on my Aunt Flo, the one that just passed away, I sent that to my Uncle Dode in Scotland. And he was, so when I called, I heard that they had received it, and I called, and my Aunt Kathy said that she'd had a chance to look through it, and she said to my uncle, don't forget to finish that book today. And he said, no, I'm savoring it, I'm going to read more tomorrow, because it was his childhood as well, right?
yeah.
And I've also found my mom had started to write down her stories as a young nurse. And so I scanned all of those and put them into one of those books and sent that to everybody as well. So they all have those. And my aunt, again, her comment was, well, the only problem with the book was it wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I always make sure that they get copies of it.
It's a really good idea, because I know certainly a lot of the older family members in my family don't have computers.
No.
So, I mean, this year my plan is to print out the family tree and get it printed out and give it to them. That because of COVID at the moment, they're at home a lot more. It gives them something to actually sit and digest and actually look through.
Well, that uncle wanted to know what channel he got Facebook on his new TV.
Oh, that's so sweet. Another thing that I've actually looked at, I'm actually working on at the moment, is I had this spare wall in my office, and I've got some frames, and it's going to be my military wall. So I have photographs and the original operational report from a great uncle who was one of the aces in World War I, flying aces
Nice.
in World War I. So I have the operational report, which actually announces to the squadron about him being awarded the DCM. So I'm going to kind of copy that and some of the photographs, and you can create on a lot of the photograph websites a collage of photographs, fit them all in where you want them, and then print them out and put them into a frame. So the plan is, I've got quite a few military ancestors, just have a frame for each one and the collection of the photographs and that collage for each.
But you know what else you could do, Claire, is when you're making those collages, you would save the one collage as a JPEG, and then you could just put each page as one of those collages and have it printed as a book.
Yeah, it could be added into a family book as well. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, good idea. I could do that. Yeah. So I think we're out. Alison's commented that she has many private family groups. So yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
It actually inspired me a bit. Should I be doing that? Another one that I actually use is...
Who would be in it though if they all fall out?
No, it's the side of the family that don't fall out.
I'd be the only one in there.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite interesting actually, just to get a family group going. I know that there's certainly websites that you can go in and put photographs in and create albums and invite friends and family. I think there's one called Family Chest, or I'll find out the name and I'll post actually tomorrow.
You can always use Blogger as well.
Okay.
Because it's free, and if you have a Google account, you can have access to it.
And
you can set it whether it's private or not private, and then just use that for the family as well.
Yeah, so you could actually create, articles on ancestors or families. Create your own blog articles and share it amongst the family.
Yep, and then you can always use that blog to print and have it in hard, and it's very inexpensive.
Yeah.
I
mean,
do that.
The other thing as well is what I've said on Kilted Ancestors is people go in, they get the monthly prompts and they put information in, copy these notes and start putting them into an album that can be passed down.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because these monthly prompts are to try and inspire people, you know, to obviously remember things from the past. And another thing that I want to touch on is obviously this year has been one of those years. What can I say? What can I say? I started off with a diary, which when it came to the end of the first lockdown, I kind of abandoned because I realised that my life... Oh, video froze.
Did it?
No, I'm still seeing it live.
Yeah, yeah.
The video, the diary got a bit monotonous. I was doing the same things pretty much every day.
All the time, yeah.
Breakfast, research, bed. So yeah, it got a bit monotonous. But I did start up, for anyone that lives in Scotland, the COVID Archive project. It is a way for anyone who lives in Scotland to share stories, photographs, or other snippets of information that they might have gathered during the pandemic. It will be a closed archive. Once it's complete, I will hand it over to an archive with the instruction that it will be closed for 40 years. Submissions are anonymous. We want your stories. We want to be able to pass on the experiences as people, families, of what we are going through in this pandemic for the next generation. Because it'll be one of those things, you know, like that we hear from the war, you know, during the war, you know, our grandchildren, children going to be saying, what happened during the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah.
So
well, and I think it's important, like you said too, to you know, talk about your fear.
Yeah.
Talk about the depression. You know, that some days, you know, if you got out of bed and waited on the couch till it was time to go back to bed, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's just, you know, that was part of the norm at the time.
Well, that's it. And everybody deals with things in different ways. They really do. I'm just going to put into the chat the details of the COVID Archive page on Facebook. You can also find it if it's going to come up. I don't know if it's going to find it. It's not finding it. If anybody in Scotland would like to join, we would welcome photographs. I've actually had contributions from an artist in Glasgow who has sent me a lot of photographs of empty streets in Glasgow, strewn masks, and yeah, it's pretty horrendous, some of the things that people are throwing away nowadays. I can't get in now, this computer is actually just slow. I think there's been a large update over the last couple of days as well. Alison's saying, great to hear about. Join my COVID Archive. If you search for, hold on. Let's see if I can find it. I know you've wrote, did you write a diary during COVID Archive or during the COVID crisis?
Me?
Yeah.
No, just that, just the book. I kept it really rather third person.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Mine is monotonous. I mean, I've got things like photographs. It was lockdown birthday. I was supposed to launch a really large project on the 75th anniversary of VE Day, which was a bomber command project. And I should have been down in Yorkshire going to a 1940s event. That didn't happen. So, you know, there's a lot of different little days that things just weren't the way that they should have been that I can certainly write about. So I've stuck the details anyway of the COVID Archive. If anyone has any images, certainly send them on to me. It would be much appreciated, and it's preserving Scotland's experiences for the next generation. I don't think we've got any more comments.
Alison just said she was saying to her husband last week, they'll be in the history books. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, come along, Alison. I'm sure everyone has photographs in their mobile phone that they can just share with us. What we do is, if there's any pictures of people, we try and blank that out. So that for privacy reasons as well. But I've had quite a few stories that have been quite sad. You think, that you're quite hard done by during this pandemic because, okay, for me, archives are closed, work's a bit slower. But, there's people really going through a lot of tough times at the moment.
And, I think that like right today, I'm good. Last week, it wasn't pretty, and I think it's okay to bounce back and forth as well. It's part of the grieving process, and we're all grieving the norm.
Yeah, it's
right?
up and down, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
up and down. And it's going to certainly be a strange Christmas and New Year for us all, I think.
But we're going to all winter this one out so we can all be together next year.
and for many years more as well.
Many more years to come.
Thank you very much, Christine, and
You're welcome.
Thank you to everyone for joining today. I hope that it has inspired you, and get on to Kilted Ancestors and share some of your stories of your family, because we would love to hear them. We want to know. It might trigger thoughts in our own families, thoughts from our own family tree. But yeah, let's get involved.
Absolutely.
See you all soon, and have a nice Christmas and New Year.
You too.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Bye.
Bye.